Chinese government always talk about how much they have invested in China, how much economic development has taken place inside Tibet. But unfortunately, Chinese government only understand one language: economic development, economic development, economic development for every problem. They don't have a holistic understanding of people's aspirations. Like people of Tibet, we have been practicing Buddhism for more than 1,300 years. So for us, more than material development, spiritual development is important. Where the Chinese government, then you are asking me why Tibetans feel oppressed. Because economic development alone does not bring happiness for people. For the Tibetan people, the freedom to use their language, to practice their religion, to preserve their way of life is more important. So if Chinese government, alongside economic development, give these freedoms to the Tibetan people, then there should be no problem for the Tibetan people to feel oppressed. So when the Chinese government, uses all kind of technology to control and oppress people, not give them freedom to think, to speak, and to act on what they want to do, then you never obviously feel oppressed. So that is why I know when the Chinese upper levels, they talk about Tibet, they always say, oh, we put in so much money in China, in Tibet, and why are the Tibetans making so much noise? Because it's not only economic development, not only material development that will bring peace and happiness for the people. So the Chinese government has to be more holistic in its understanding, more holistic in its approach, and develop policies and programs, not at destroying Tibetan identity. Because Tibetan identity in its language, because Tibetan language is one of the 15 oldest languages in this world. And we have transliterated every available Sanskrit Buddhist text into Tibetan language. And Tibetan language is the only language that has all the teachings of the Buddha. That is why it's very, very important language. And when you are destroying that, then how will you feel? Now, if somebody else destroys Chinese language, what will the Chinese people think? So we have to embrace diversity. We have to embrace multiculturalism. And Tibetan culture and richness of Tibetan culture that is rooted in nonviolence and compassion has a lot more to contribute to this world. That is why I think there needs to be better understanding from the Chinese leaders, more common sense, because we have addressed China's main concern of sovereignty. So we are following this middle way policy. Now on the second question, Tibetans, of course, now are getting more and more scattered, more dispersed around the world. Maximum number of Tibetans is still in India and a smaller number in Nepal. We are only about 130,000 Tibetans in exile, and about 72,000 in India, 10,000 in Nepal, and the rest of the Tibetans are spread across 25 different countries. So physically, we have become more distant, but emotionally, we are still close. So that is why, as the democratically elected leader of the Tibetan people, one of my job, now that His Holiness is 88 years old, and he cannot travel around the world as much as he used to do, and His Holiness is our guiding light, he is our unifying force. But now I have to make more effort to reach out to Tibetan communities as much as possible. So during my campaign also I said, if you elect me, if you give me this responsibility, I will visit every single Tibetan community at least 2 times in 5 years. And this is also one of the reasons why I'm here in Paris, and tomorrow evening I have meeting with my community people. So we have also learned over the last 60 years as to how we should govern ourselves. So even though we are getting more dispersed, now we are using more modern technology, e-governance, digitalization of everything. So we are also undertaking AI, So for all this, we are developing our unique system of administration, even though we are very spread out. We have 12 offices of Tibet around the world. Every Tibetan association comes under one of these offices of Tibet. And wherever there's a sizable number of Tibetans, they have formed Tibetan associations, and these Tibetan associations are elected leaders. They work pro bono, and they organize weekend Tibetan classes. They organize weekend Tibetan cultural programs. So that is how we keep our culture alive, our identity alive in exile. We have huge monasteries in exile in India. Now there are more Buddhist centers around the world. So it's not only Tibetan, but Tibetan culture has spread across. Mongolians practice Tibetan Buddhism. The Russian republics of Kalmykia, Buryat and Tuva, they practice Tibetan Buddhism. The whole Himalayan region from Arunachal Pradesh to Jammu and Kashmir or Ladakh practice Tibetan Buddhism, in Nepal and in Bhutan also. Now there are so many new followers of His Holiness the Dalai Lama around the world. People come from Japan, Singapore, Vietnam, many Buddhist countries come to Thailand. They come to listen to His Holiness. There are many Western followers of. They also learn Tibetan culture and Tibetan language. So we have also developed artificial intelligence to preserve Tibetan language till the end of this world. We are working on it, so we are not lacking behind, even though we are a small community with the help of other governments, including Indian government, who have been very kind to us. And we are doing our best to keep our culture alive, despite all the adversities, despite all the challenges we have. Every community goes through these challenges, and we are ready to face it.